Good Lord. Happy to see you.
Yes. Welcome, Robina. We are so delighted that you accepted our notice at such short notice.
So, okay. Tell me what I should do, please, Venerable Aileen.
So, Venerable Robina, we're handing the floor over to you to offer the teaching. Tenzin Paldron and Tenzin Sunma Sangmo were going to. Did you want to speak about Thosamling just briefly now?
Well, Thosamling is located in Lower Dharamsala. It's surrounded by the beautiful Himalayan mountains. And thanks to Venerable Samu's hard work over the last 17 years, this is like a little pure land or an oasis of beautiful trees and fruits and many birds and butterflies. And we have a wonderful Gompa that His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, has come and visited and taught him. And you can still feel his presence and his energy. And we have two geshes, a retired geshe and a geshe Larampa, who is currently teaching us, Lamrim, and other courses. And we also have Geshe Ma living with us. They reside within the territory of Thosamling. Geshe Ma is teaching us Tibetan language classes, and she's also going to be teaching other Dharma courses, which you will see a list of programs on our website. So please check all the programs, including visiting teachers, some special visiting teachers like Ishidor Dedamdal and Atisha Mathur, who is going to lead an introduction to debate retreat. So we are very excited about our programs, and we are particularly excited about this first online retreat. So we hope you will be able to come actually and visit Thosamling in future. So we invite Robina with no further ado to please take over.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So we let's just start with a little as the lamas would say, our motivation, but we might say, what's our purpose? Our goal. It means that. And as one lama recently said, it was so nice. He said, when your motivation is right, when your goal is right, you always end up in the right place. I thought that was nice. So let's think we're here together to listen to these words, and I'm certainly listening as well, coming from Lord Buddha through the minds of our own, from our teachers. And it's these words are about how to develop our own amazing potential so we can be of benefit to others, how we can develop these two wings of the bird. I love that analogy, wisdom and compassion. So we think we're going to listen to these teachings so that we can take some tools from it, develop our marvelous potential so we can be of benefit to others. And I'll sing a little prayer which expresses that. The first two lines express our reliance on Lord Buddha and his teachings, and the second two lines express this goal, this purpose, this motivation. Sangye charang soke chognam la janchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la janchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la janchu baru dagni kyab suchi Dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangi drupa shog. Well, I think what you wanted me to talk about is love and compassion. So that's the compassion wing. We've got the work, the nuts and bolts of all the work we have to do in our own minds. It's all to do with our own minds, but the wisdom wing is very internal and kind of like the retreat mode, where you learn to abide by the laws of karma, you learn to stop causing your own future suffering, you learn to unpack and unravel your own mind and get rid of the delusions. This is the first work we need to do, finally cutting all the delusions completely and getting some wisdom. And then on the basis of this, we're able to realize we're all in the same boat, So His Holiness says compassion, you can say it's the point, but compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. And as Amma Zopa sometimes says, meaning well is not enough. And this is what we love to do. We mean well, but we make a mess so often. And so in other words, compassion and love are the essence of all the virtues in us. They're the qualities that connect us to others, When we've got those fully developed, there's no barrier between self and other. So the first job is to cut that barrier down. And that's the work we have to do on ourselves. This is why Lord Buddha talks about very first, not even try and benefit others, please, but at least stop harming them. The very first level is at least stop harming sentient beings. So, and the point is too, that the wisdom wing is we are the beneficiaries, and we are the beneficiaries of this. So what it does is, one, is lessen our own neurosis and bring us more contentment and fulfillment, but also what it does automatically is break down these barriers that delusions have created that make up this concept of self and other, So we need to develop love and compassion, but it's so limited. Our capacity for love and compassion is totally limited by our own neuroses. If I'm driven, or if you like, our love and compassion are polluted by our attachment and our other nonsense, So we need to become very familiar first with these and learn to harness these. First, we learn to control the servants of the mind, which is our body and speech. At least don't harm others. And that already makes a dramatic change in our mind. And then we learn to actually, as I said, unpack and unravel the neuroses, attachment in particular, effectively according to the Four Noble Truths. Attachment's our main problem, This kind of emotional hunger, this neurotic assumption that I've got to get what I want every millisecond. It drives every sentient being. And it's so automatic and so primordial, we don't even locate it. We don't even notice it. We just take it for granted. And so in other words, at the moment with our delusions, we see all sentient beings through the lenses of our needs, we should be embarrassed about how self-centered it is. So working on those delusions and lessening them, naturally, the overt job we're doing is lessening our own suffering. But what inevitably happens is we start to open up ourselves to others. We're gradually breaking down those barriers. And we go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat, Then we can really continue to work on our mind, never stopping from here to Buddhahood, but then it's in relation directly to how to benefit others. There's different emphasis at different levels of teachings, It's very natural, very organic. We can have love and compassion until the cows come home, but if we don't have an understanding of what is holding us back, we don't understand that love and compassion is polluted by our own neediness, our own attachment, our own neuroses. This is very hard to see, So what is love? What is compassion? Well, the definition, very basic, the definition of love is as a thought, starts with a thought. May you be happy. You see a sentient being, you want them to be happy. You see them happy, you're happy they're happy. That's love. That's the meaning of love. Compassion, you see they're suffering and you don't want them to suffer, or you wish they don't suffer. This is the essence of all the virtues. So of course we have to grow these limitlessly. When you think about the Bodhisattva path, it's like outrageous, The levels of love and compassion we can accomplish are astonishing, are way beyond what normal modern psychology and neuroscientific views would posit. The level of love and compassion of the Bodhisattvas is like mental illness as far as our modern world is concerned. It doesn't seem possible. When you've got bodhicitta, one of the qualities is there's no longer the thought of an ordinary eye. It just sounds really weird in the modern world. But also, what's interesting, I remember when I first heard the teachings about bodhicitta from my teachers, the very first heard, it seemed like insane. It's too difficult, way too high, not possible. How could you talk like that? Literally learning to be a saint. When I was a Catholic, I was in love with all the saints. And I thought, my goodness, how could I do that? And then I heard His Holiness say, and it was the revelation, He said, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. Suddenly it suddenly gave me a way into it. Suddenly it helped me understand. And we hear the Lamas talk all the time, they talk like this. And so I think in our modern world, we feel that's a bit inferior. Oh no, that sounds inferior. How can I practice compassion for my benefit? But we've got to understand that that's true. Don't, even when we look at all the different stages of developing bodhicitta, you go through the various 6 causes and 1 effect or something, and then the ones of exchanging self for others. You go through the stages of first seeing the disadvantages to yourself of being self-centered. And then you learn to see the advantages to yourself of thinking of others. Initially, that seems a bit inferior to us. But even the very first level of teachings, learning, I think we really don't really get it properly about karma in our culture. We kind of tend, the very first level, really learning to realize I do not want future suffering. And what do I do to stop that? I stop causing it. That means I stop harming others. So when we hear that, like the 10 non-virtues, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, we think, oh, it's all about sentient beings. It is in a sense, but it's not. The reason, what is behind Lord Buddha's exhorting us not to kill and steal and lie isn't because it directly harms others. That's what defines a negative action, one that harms another. But why he exhorts us right at the very beginning stages of our practice to refrain from harming others is for our own sake. We still quite can't hear that. That sounds selfish to us as well. We have to understand that very clearly. That's for my benefit. I'm the direct beneficiary of not killing and stealing because I prevent my future suffering. And then yes, incidentally, as Lama Zopa says, the rats and roaches will have a party because we leave them in peace. They're the indirect beneficiaries of the first stages of practice. But on the compassion wing, it's still us working on our mind, but we really learning to open up to others and to see, because we've removed some of our own neuroses, we've broken down these barriers to some degree, we can begin to realize we are in the same boat. You know, we connect with others. But it's intensely difficult. And the other reason, one of the major reasons, when we think about Buddhism in the West, people love the idea of compassion. Many people become Buddhists because of compassion and love. They love those teachings. They love the teachings of bodhicitta. And what I find amazing, lots of Westerners love to do Tonglen, this outrageous practice where you visualize taking on the suffering of others. They love it. We love it. I find it very surprising. But what we don't realize is our level of compassion is limited. So right now we have compassion only for a few people, for you children and a few animals, if we're lucky. In other words, they've got to be innocent victims. In other words, people have to deserve my compassion. And if you deserve my compassion, that means you're doing what I want. So it's really quite heavy. We should be embarrassed at how self-centered it is. But when we understand the levels of compassion that Buddha's talking about, I mean, they're outrageous. It's got nothing to do with me. And that's why we don't have much compassion until we understand the Four Noble Truths. You've got to understand the Four Noble Truths first. For whom? For you. Suffering. There is suffering. There are causes. You can get rid of it, and then it's how to do it. But it's for you. So when we understand the three kinds of suffering, one, the suffering of suffering, when the bad things happen. Two, the suffering of change, what we call happiness, which Buddha says is a more profound level of suffering. And then three, of course, the subtlest one. So we don't understand this, and we don't understand the causes of that suffering, my delusions and my past actions. We can't begin to have compassion for others. Because what's compassion? By definition, compassion is may you not suffer. But our only thought of suffering is the first kind. The only way we think of suffering in the world, unless we study Buddha's teachings, unless we've done the wisdom wing first. The only suffering we know about is when bad things happen to people. So we only can have compassion for the little animals that get hurt by humans and few children. I'm being a bit sarcastic. Innocent victims, because we don't understand the subtle levels of suffering. So if you haven't done the first stages of practice, if you haven't gone through the Four Noble Truths, if you haven't dug deep into your suffering and how you have caused your suffering and utterly revolted by the thought of suffering, in other words, as we would put it in the West, having compassion for yourself. I mean, Buddha doesn't talk like that, but that we get that. That's what compassion for yourself means. Stop harming others, because that causes you suffering. If we don't get that, and we don't understand the second kind of suffering, which is the suffering of change, which is the happiness which is what we call happiness, but which Buddha calls a subtler, more profound level of suffering. When the nice things happen, we don't understand that one. We can't really have much compassion for others. And if we don't really understand the first one, that our harming others is what causes us to be harmed in the future. We don't get that for ourselves. Then when we see other people harming others, of course, we're not going to have compassion for them. But when we understand the Four Noble Truths, and then we will understand why the victims of this moment are suffering because they harmed in the past, and we will understand why the harmers, driven by their own crazy karma from their own negativity, are causing unbelievable suffering for themselves in the future. We will not understand that level of compassion if we haven't first done the first stages of practice and looked at our own minds and done the wisdom wing, in other words. So it's impossible to have the levels of compassion that Lord Buddha talks about if we haven't done the wisdom wing. We can't just leap in and think we've got compassion. And the other reason is because we can see it now with the suffering of the world right now, certainly the pandemic. I mean, the number of people who had mental breakdowns and burned out and all these things, because if we're Buddhists, we don't understand suffering properly, you know. And we don't know, and then of course, I mean, you hear about some of the nurses and people working in hospitals killing themselves. I mean, certainly in other countries where I was living in America, the number of thousands of people dying, hospitals completely overwhelmed. Because we don't understand, we don't understand why there's all this suffering, and it literally becomes overwhelming. And this is the part that's very shocking, that we don't really get if we haven't really looked into the mind and understood Buddha's view of the mind. Why we suffer when we see other people suffering is not because other people are suffering. We do not suffer because of compassion. Compassion is a virtue. The Lord Buddha's view of the mind is very clear. We have a bunch of, there's 3 categories of states of mind. Only 3. There are the neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, ego-based ones, which are insanities. We're all mentally ill with them. Ego, grasping, attachment, and the rest. They're all mental illnesses. Buddha would have liked that phrase. They're the ones we're going to try and get rid of. Then you've got the virtues. And then the third lot, they call them neutral, but I prefer to call them the mechanics of the mind, like concentration, intention, attention, discrimination, all the parts of our mind that make us function. But so, you know, we only have these 3 categories of states of mind. So the virtues, by definition, you cannot suffer because of having a virtue. You do not suffer because you've got compassion. That's what we think in the West. No, we suffer because we have attachment. And so a person, there they are, a kind person, a loving person, working in one of those hospitals, exhausted from the hard work, seeing all this endless death and suffering. And what makes them find it unbearable, one, is because they have no logic for why it's happening. There's no view of karma. I mean, one of the main reasons bodhisattvas have such compassion for the whole world, because we have no understanding of cause and effect. We have no understanding that every sentient being is the source of their own happiness and suffering. That is not a view we have. And second is we think we're overwhelmed because we see the suffering, and we think we're overwhelmed because we have compassion. No, you can't suffer if you have compassion. We suffer because we have attachment and this junkie in us, this painful junkie that only wants the nice things. Attachment is this terrible, painful mental illness inside every sentient being that is desperate to only get the nice experiences. It can't stand problems. So if you combine that level of compassion, a person with a big heart, but they've got attachment, which they don't recognize because we don't talk like this in modern psychology, then of course they're going to have a mental breakdown. Of course they're going to depress, and of course they'll kill themselves when it's really too much. But we think we suffer because of compassion. We do not. You can't suffer because of compassion. Bodhisattvas do not suffer by definition. Suffering comes from delusions and negative karma. So that's why I've got to be clear about the meaning of these words, you know. That's why we've got to do the wisdom wing first. We've got to strengthen ourselves. The wisdom wing is like the retreat mode. You control your body, you control your speech, you control your mind, you harness the crazy berserk energy. Living in vows, doing lots of purification, lots of practice. It's like the retreat mode. That's where you do the work on yourself, and what you're developing is a strong, powerful, self-confident, grounded human being who then can really begin to deal with the craziness of the world, you know. And by the time you begin to get some bodhicitta, you know, the world is grist for your mill. Bodhisattvas would rather live in the crazy maniac cities where all the mad people are, not go off and live in a tree, you know, because those sentient beings need us. But you can't have that kind of inner strength if you haven't worked on your mind. And that's the part that's brand new to us. We don't think this in the West. Unless we understand this properly, we're not putting Buddha's teachings properly into practice, you know. The wisdom wing is this powerful level of work where you literally unpack and unravel your own mind, and you gradually learn to lessen your neuroses and grow your virtues. Then you become powerful and strong and self-confident, and the bonus, you become happy. I mean, this seems too weird for us. If you see suffering, how can you stay happy? I mean, look at His Holiness. I mean, he's the most naked, obvious example on the planet. He's been 16 since he was 16, isn't it? Since he was 16 in 1950, he's been running that country, running the world, you know. And look at him, he's still perky and happy. He tries to act like an ordinary person like us and confesses to being angry and all the rest because he's trying to be normal, you know. But you can see he's this happy person, blissfully fun, laughing and cracking jokes. And look at his life. I mean, look at the nightmare of the suffering of what's going on and what he's doing. So why is he a stable, happy person? Why is he grounded? Because he's accomplished the wisdom wing. He's quit delusions. He's quit suffering and its causes. So then your compassion and love and patience and perseverance can be tremendous. And the strength of a bodhisattva, in other words. We've got to understand these, even intellectually, you know, it's very powerful. Then we can have real love, proper love, not polluted, not sentimental love, not sentimental compassion. It's so soft and weak, you know. What time is it? Okay. It's like now 45 minutes has really passed because I talk fast. So now you're going to ask me some questions. I think the best thing is to have conversation now. So talk to me, people. Ask questions now. Any questions you like. I think all the stuff will come out in the questions. This is what I like best, having a conversation. So ask me questions. Any question, I don't care. Start the ball rolling, people.
Thank you, Venerable Robina. So if you can raise your electronic hand, if you know how to do that.
Or just put your hand up or
Or
shout.
just wave, but best if,
People, just start it all going. Start the ball rolling. Any questions?
or send a message into the chat and I'll find you.
Okay.
Anugraha, I shall unmute you.
Hello, Anugraha. How are you? Happy to see you again.
Sorry, there you go.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, good. Talk to me.
Yeah. Could you please talk a little bit more of this subtle level of suffering and its relation with attachment?
Which level of suffering you're talking about? What did you say?
Subtle.
Start again.
Yeah, because you said I can recognize this gross level of suffering I live in, but when you mentioned this subtle level of suffering, I have no idea about it.
Oh,
And
okay,
how
I
to
see.
relate it
Well,
to
yeah, I mean,
attachment.
in a simple way, Buddha talks about 3 levels of suffering. The very first one is fairly obvious, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
when, in the simplest sense, the suffering of suffering is really when the bad things happen. So if you just think in your own ordinary human life, the suffering of suffering is when you get the knee ache, when your husband is mean to you, when you don't get what you want, when you meet the red light, all the way to the most intense bad things like sickness or being harmed by others. That's the suffering of suffering, just in this ordinary human life. That's, I think, the only way we think about suffering. So when with that view, when we look at the world, that's also the only suffering we see. We see the suffering of poverty and sickness and people being abused and the animals being harmed. That's the only suffering we see. That's even the meaning of the word as far as we're concerned. So the second kind of suffering, this is not evident to us. This is totally Buddha's unique view. Well, actually, the Hindus before him, they identified it, but it's crucial to understand it. It's much harder to see. So the second kind of suffering, Buddha calls it the suffering of change. So in the simplest sense, what he's referring to is what we refer to as happiness. In other words, when the good things happen. Now, if we analyze our lives, Anugraha, we can see this throughout one day. If you could list all your experiences, some of them would be the suffering of suffering. The bad thing happens. You stub your toe. Someone was mean to you. You understand what I'm saying? When the thing you didn't want happened. And then the happiness is when you get a good feeling, when you've ate the nice cake, when the person was friendly to you, the green lights all the way. Simple, simple. Now, the analysis of this is, we have to understand the mind. We have to understand Buddha's view of the mind, which is very distinct. So the 3, we all know about the 3 poisons. This is one of our favorite phrases in Buddhism. You know, the 3 poisons Buddha talks about, the 3 toxic emotions, which are really the summary of all the neurotic delusions that he talks about that we have, which are the cause of our suffering. So there's the root delusion, which is this false assumption of a concrete I. Forget that one, okay? That gives rise to this intense one that's called attachment, and it's multifaceted. Anugraha, you know, we've talked about, you've heard. So its primordial energy is dissatisfaction, always not satisfied, always thinking I want something more. So naturally hankering after something. So this obvious level of attachment is always for the external objects of the senses, getting everything to be nice. So this attachment is like a junkie in us that only wants the nice things. It drives all of our decisions in samsara. Do you understand? You recognize? So that it's a very deep assumption. So when you get what it wants, that's what we call happiness. You want a cake, you get a cake. It's called happiness. You want a nice feeling, you go, you listen to some music. You know, attachments driving all the time, craving to find the nice things, and that will trigger a happy feeling. That's what we mean by life. We want to have those happy feelings. So now, what happens when attachment doesn't get what it wants? That's called the suffering of suffering. You stub your toe. You didn't want to stub your toe. You wanted a pleasant feeling. You don't want the red lights. You don't want your husband to be mean to you. You don't want the bad things to happen. So then when attachment doesn't get what it wants, that arises as aversion. And the volatile level of aversion is what we call anger. So anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And that's when the suffering of suffering starts. The suffering of change, though, is when you get what you want. In other words, what we call happiness, was when attachment gets what it wants. That's what we're craving all the time. But Buddha's analysis, and we've got to look into it very carefully, he says, no, people, it does, getting what you want, getting what attachment was, does trigger a pleasant feeling, but it doesn't last. And so that's not very convincing to us. It kind of doesn't seem very grand and exciting. What do you mean it doesn't last? Because he calls it the suffering of change. But the analysis is, because we've got attachment, this junky in us that only wants the nice feelings, we get the cake, we get all excited, we anticipate the pleasant feelings, and the pleasant feelings will come, definitely, but we all realize they don't last. And this is the point, because dissatisfaction is so strong. When you have the first mouthful, you're so excited, you're anticipating happy feelings come, but you're still not happy. You're not satisfied, so you want a second piece, and you're still not satisfied, so you want a third piece. And before you know it, if you eat the fourth piece, now you're going to vomit. So where did the happiness go? It went down the toilet. It's now become unhappiness. So the suffering of change is what we initially refer to as happiness, but because we're never satisfied with it, by the more the cake you eat, that gradually causes you to want to vomit. And that's the nature of this subtle level of suffering. We know it when we hear it, but we're so programmed and we just don't notice. And then we think the next day we forget all about the vomit. We only remember that it did trigger some nice feelings in the beginning, and we want the cake again, and we're hoping and again it will bring happiness. But as my mother used to say, my Catholic mum, the more you want, the more you get, the more you want. So that's what Buddha is referring to as the suffering of change. So all the happiness we get, which looks lovely, but it doesn't last. And then we go, well, I mean, we know it doesn't last, Buddha, so why are you being so mean? But what he's trying to tell us, basically, eventually, is, well, he has found a method to get happiness that does last. That's the reference point. And that, so in other words, samsara, what he's saying is, we think happiness is when we get what attachment wants. No, Buddha says, what happiness is when you give up attachment. So that's the analysis, roughly speaking. Do you understand? But then, of course, there's an even more subtle, more pervasive level of suffering, and that's called all pervasive suffering, or different terms. And that is fine. That is only finally removed, which is being born in the first place as a samsaric being with the samsaric aggregates, with attachment and aversion, in a world that is kind of like that you need, that is made by those delusions. And so that's only, so the first kind of suffering, you quit that by stopping harming others, by abiding by the laws of karma. You stop the second kind of suffering by giving up attachment. You stop all suffering, and the most profound one, by realizing emptiness. This is Buddha's methodology. You understand, Nugraha? Good, darling. Yes, Ava, talk to me. Hello, where are you? Talk to me.
Hello.
Hello, darling.
Yeah. Hello. Venerable, I wanted to ask, what about how do we show compassion to people who, are, who get into antisocial activities or criminal activities?
You mean
So
people
how
who harm
could we-
others? You mean people who harm
Yeah.
people, don't you?
Yes.
Well, that's the whole
So
point
how
I'm
would
talking
we
about.
show compassion towards them, because they have already hurt you so much? So maybe they've taken away something which was really precious for you. Maybe it's
I
not.
can't hear your words very well, Ava, but what I think you're asking is, how do we develop compassion for the bad
Yeah.
people? That's
Yeah.
the question, isn't it? Well, that's the point I'm talking about. So let me go into more detail. If we start at the very beginning of Buddhist practice and you learn about suffering in the Four Noble Truths, Buddha's talking to you. He's telling you about your suffering, and he's telling you about the causes of your suffering. So the basic teaching of the Buddha is that our suffering, for example, the suffering of suffering, which is when bad things happen to us. And this already is very difficult for us because we assume we are all innocent victims, and we assume suffering happens unfairly, and we don't know why it happens. But Buddha's analysis is very clear that any experience we have, whether it's happiness or suffering, is the main source of it is our past actions. We are our own creators. That's what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said one time about karma. So it means we have to understand the law of karma, which is this fundamental teaching, as you know, it's been around in India for 3,000 years, you know? It's the fundamental cause of what every sentient being is experiencing every moment, the fruits of their own past actions. So far, so good. You hear my words? You hear me so far?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So now when you understand that for yourself, you realize I do not want future suffering. And that becomes the drive that causes you to want to live in vows, to abide by the laws of karma, because you don't want future suffering. It's a very strong motivation. We are sick of suffering. It's a bit like when you really finally realize you don't want diabetes, so you stop eating sugar. You stop causing diabetes because you have to do the job. So it's like that. Buddha says we cause our own suffering and our own happiness. So that's the first level. Now, when you understand that for yourself, Arva, when you understand that any suffering that you experience is because you caused it, now you can go to the compassion wing, and now you see somebody, say, kicking the dog. So one, you will have compassion for the dog, the victim, but you know the dog created the cause in the past to be harmed. You know that. You have compassion for the dog, but you will even have such compassion for the guy who kicks the dog because you realize they've got this karmic connection, and because they have been harmed in the past and because of their own suffering, they are harming others. And why do you have compassion? Because the victim, the dog, has just finished its suffering, but the guy who's kicking the dog or doing the raping or the torturing or the killing or the stealing or the dropping bombs, they are beginning unbelievable countless lifetimes of future suffering. That is the basis of compassion. That's why it's impossible, without first doing this basic work of understanding the Four Noble Truths for yourself, you cannot begin to understand the rest of the world. This is the logic of it, Arva. It's not easy. Do you understand or not? He's harmed. In other words, you have compassion for a harmer because they're harming themselves. But our trouble is when we say the word compassion, it's kind of sentimental. Oh, the poor thing can't help it. It's not like that. Compassion is very powerful when it's mixed with wisdom. And then you will be wise to help that person. Put them in prison, absolutely, but out of compassion for them. But it's a very different view because we all create our own suffering and we create our own happiness. This takes time to really get, you know. Are we communicating?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
We've got to work on it. It's very hard. This is the logic. This is Buddha's teaching, you know. You understand, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Good, darling. Nivita, hello. Talk to me.
Well, I wanted to ask, how can we tell when compassion starts falling into pity? For example, like with people especially close or who have hurt me, I feel that sometimes my compassion sort of blurs with pity and I can't quite distinguish it sometimes.
I know that's inevitable. I mean, it's hard to see our minds, sweetheart, and our minds got so many thoughts all mixed together, a big soup in there. The more you cultivate awareness of yourself, that's the starting point. I mean, the starting point is to control your body and speech first. That's why that's always the first level of practice. Don't say the word. You really harness the servants of your delusions. That's the first level of practice. Then with some daily practice, you learn to pay attention to what is happening inside here. That's the step we have to take. And then when throughout the day, the more you do your morning practice, the more you control your body and speech in your daily practice, the more you are able not only to be noticing the outside people, but you start to pay attention to what's happening in your mind before it comes out the mouth, before it rises to the surface as an emotion. That's the skill we have to learn. And then you just become more clear and more precise in the observation of your own mind of what the hell is going on inside there. It really does take time, you know, it really does take time. But our trouble is we only really begin to notice our mind when it comes to the level of emotion, which is when the physical body is involved. So we have to learn to develop more awareness to catch the thought processes that inform our emotions. And that really takes time. We've got to be watching our mind like a hawk. every second. But it can't happen unless you also control your body and speech, live in vows, do purification practice every day, and consciously decide not to vomit out every word you feel, not to just do whatever you want with your body and speech. That's why disciplining our body and speech is the very first level of practice in Buddhism. It's got real logic to it. So this gradual process, darling, you can't get ahead of yourself. You can only know what's going on in here, and as we continue to practice, and you catch yourself. And then when you catch yourself, you must then learn from your mistakes, which is why it's good to do the purification practice every day. But it's very hard, darling, because we only really notice what's happening when it becomes emotional, and that's way too late. Are we communicating? Yeah? So slowly, Nivita. Roshni, talk to me.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Could you explain a little more about karma without
Sure. Yes, of course.
without attaching, the universal, without attaching value judgments, without attaching a universal sense of right and wrong, specifically from the
Well,
point
I'm not
of
sure.
dependent
I
or
don't know what.
exception?
Okay, I don't know quite what you mean by this. I understand, darling. I don't know what you mean a little bit by what you're saying, but all I can tell you is this. Okay. I think that second part of what you said seems as part of our problem with hearing about karma, because we hear it as punishment and reward. And I really have to talk about this first, because I think our big problem is we have this, especially we brought up in religion. I mean, certainly for us, so I don't know about you, but brought up as a Christian, the Christian and the creator religions, there's a very strong view of punishment and reward. So as soon as we hear, don't do this and don't do that and don't do this, we feel like then if I do it, I'll get punished. And that is the view. I mean, basically by definition, certainly in the Christian teachings, by definition, a sin, a negative action, is defined as doing what God said not to do. So I think we all have that view in our mind very deeply. We live our lives not, thinking we've got to do what mummy said, we've got to do what daddy said, we've got to do what God said, we've got to do what the judge says, we've got to do what the government says. And then we think if we get caught, we'll get into trouble and we'll get punished. So this punishment reward model is very deep in our minds. Are we communicating so far, Roshni?
Yeah, but I'm saying that if you have gone beyond those, if you have developed a basic understanding, if you've developed a basic understanding of emptiness and dependent origination, where do you draw the line?
Sweetheart, forget, that's too advanced, Roshni. You're leaping ahead, darling. The Lord Buddha's teachings about karma, of course, it's totally related to emptiness and dependent arising. Of course it is. But that doesn't deny morality and good and bad. It reinforces morality and good and bad. Otherwise, you're being nihilistic. So the Buddhist view of karma is very clear. But first, before I say that, if you go to your doctor and she says, listen, Roshni, I really beg you not to smoke cigarettes. And you will say, why? And now we know her answer is, well, sweetheart, because smoking cigarettes will cause you to suffer in the future and you'll get cancer. Now, when you hear that, you don't hear that as punishment and reward, do you?
No, yeah,
you hear it as you think now, but if you hear Lord Buddha say, Roshni, if you kill, you will go to the lower realms, you hear that as punishment, don't you?
Right.
That's right. That's the mistake, honey. In Buddhism, there is no punisher, darling. There is no creator. There is no rewarder. There is no concept like that. We have to learn that. Karma is a natural law such that if you put that seed in the ground, you will get that fruit. If you eat sugar, you will get diabetes. If you smoke a cigarette, you might get cancer. It is not punishment. It is not reward. It's exactly the same with karma, but we hear it as punishment and reward, darling. That's our mistake. All Buddha's telling us is, listen, guys, all I have found from my own direct experience is that doing actions driven by attachment and driven by anger can only ripen in the future as your terrible suffering. So we have to hear it in a most practical, intelligent way. That's the job we have to do. Then karma is very different. Are we communicating?
Yes.
Good. Because Lord Buddha's point is, it's an amazing law. I mean, he didn't invent it. He's not a creator. He's observed it. It's the natural law that runs the universe, such that every living being, every millisecond, just naturally is experiencing the fruits of their past actions, all their happiness as well. We forget about the happiness. And every sentient being, every millisecond, is just naturally sowing the seeds that will ripen as our future happiness and suffering. We are literally our own creators. So it is kind of infantile to hear it as punishment and reward, but that's what we do. We have this dualistic view. We put that meaning onto it, you know. It's not like that at all. It takes us time. And that's why it's really hard for us to get our head around karma, because we misuse it like a big stick, you know. But the other point is too, we never ask why do good things happen, because we only get upset when the bad things happen. But every millisecond of anything that's ever happened in your life, Roshni, of goodness and kindness and people being loving to you, you having money in the bank, you having a job, you having a healthy body, every second of that is the fruit of your past virtuous actions. And if we realized how much virtue we must have practiced in the past, we would be blissed out with joy. But we only ever think of karma as punishment. That's what's so bizarre, you know. Do you understand my point?
Yeah.
Good.
It's more of a basic cause and effect, really.
What, darling?
I mean,
what?
If you think about it simply, it's just basic cause and effect, right?
Well, of course it is. That's what I'm saying. So what are you saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly right. There's no judgment.
Yeah.
There's no moralistic judgment thing there. We put that on top of it, you know. That's the problem. That's the problem, darling. In other words, we're so ridiculous. It's sort of like if we had that dualistic view, and when your doctor says don't smoke, and you think of it as, oh, I'm going to get punished, and then you go home and your doctor's not there, you think, oh, she won't see me smoke, so I won't get cancer. Everybody would laugh at us. But that's the instinctive view of ego. We want to hide ourselves. We don't want to get caught, you know. We're so childish. Karma takes care. I mean, karma is a natural law. Whether you're looking or not, you know, whether you see someone do something bad or good or not has got nothing to do with it. So this really takes time to hear it in a very practical way. Then we'll really grow up and start to take responsibility and start to be accountable and realize that we create our own lives, you know. That's when we start to understand karma properly. Thank you very much, Roshni.
Thank you.
Talk to me, Declan.
Venerable Robina, Declan's asked me to read the question out.
Okay.
And I've got one other in the chat also that's anonymous.
Good.
Declan's asked, it's a question for you, Venerable Robina. What challenges do you face on a daily basis and how do you address them?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I want to get what I want as well. I want my nice coffee, the right flavor and the right temperature. And I don't want to stub my toe, and I want people to do what I want. I'm like everyone else, same. So every day it's daily work, isn't it? Learning to, as Lama Zopa says, we have to learn to like problems like we like ice cream. So we've got to, and this is where we've got to, otherwise, change our interpretation of our experiences, because that's what practice is. Learning to change the way we interpret things, not just seeing everything through the lenses of attachment. That's what daily life is. So then I'm like everyone else. I want to get what I want as well. So trying to learn to greet the problem and see it as good. That's my answer. What else? Puja.
Thank you, Robina. So
yeah,
I have one more. I have a couple more, but I'll just read this one.
Okay, good.
Why is self-compassion the hardest to develop?
I don't know. Is that? Well, I think I don't understand that. It's very weird. That's how we all talk in the West, but it's completely mistaken. It's completely mistaken. I mean, we say we have compassion for others, but it's only sentimental compassion. It's only for the poor little doggy woggy and the pussycat and the poor little victim. That's not really compassion at all. It's sentimental attachment. So compassion for yourself means you know, what that means is if you had compassion for yourself, you wouldn't smoke cigarettes because you don't want cancer. So if you had compassion for yourself, you would not want to lie and steal and kill and be angry and depressed and self-piteous and blame everybody else for your problems, because that will cause you future suffering. So self-compassion is not what we think. We think self-compassion is lying down, having a weep and having a massage. And also self-compassion is hard if you talk, because attachment, its real energy is dissatisfaction. We all hate ourselves. This is a function of attachment. It's a function of practicing attachment for eons, Buddha says, that we're always dissatisfied. And the thing we're most dissatisfied with is me. We are never enough. We never have enough. We're not good enough. We're not beautiful enough. It's the default assumption of attachment. That's what, so to change that is our starting point. Then we can start to have some joy in our lives, which comes from giving up the causes of our suffering, which means abiding by the laws of karma, taking responsibility, and that changes us from being this self-piteous victim, which is how we think now. We're like this poor little self-pity me who didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. I mean, this is how we all are. This is a tragedy. So learning to give that up is really powerful. Learning to have respect for ourselves, to learn to know that we're a work in progress, we're doing our best, and to rejoice in our good qualities. Yeah, you're right. It's very hard for us. We are addicted to finding fault. We almost think it's a virtue to think we're creeps, you know. It's very depressing. And our compassion for others based on that is not very valid. It won't last long, you know. It's very sentimental. So we have to start with the wisdom wing, start with ourselves, you know. Takes time. Who's next, Aileen? Well, you want me to lead a meditation or something, didn't you, Aileen? Is that the idea?
That would be wonderful too, Venerable Robina.
Let's do it short. You don't have to, just a minute, please. Wait. Answer my question. So do you want me or not? Otherwise we'll keep talking and answer questions.
Yes, I just want to say there's also a lot of questions in the chat. So
well, I think that far better. Someone else can do meditation. This is more important. So yeah, you can do meditation. Someone else can.
I'll lead meditations tomorrow, Venerable Robina.
That's fine. So ask the questions, please.
Okay, so what kind of karma are we creating when we try to help people but create a mess?
Well, you know, I mean, this is a very interesting point. Thank you. Good question. Let's look right at the basics. It's a good question. When we do an action, quote unquote, create karma, if let's say a complete action of, say, not killing. No, let's say of killing. Good question. Let's say of killing, a complete action of killing. There are 4 things in place for it to qualify as a complete action. And a complete action of not killing, a negative action, would drop a negative karmic seed in your main bank vault, and then it would ripen as a future lower realm suffering. That's a simple example. Okay, so now 4 things in place for it to qualify as a complete negative action. 1, there has to be that mouse, the sentient being in your kitchen. 2, your mind has to be involved. And there's many things, but 2, keep it simple. There has to be the intention, not motivation, intention, I will kill. Very bare bones. I will kill. And then the crucial piece then is your motivation that drives that. And these come together so totally, it's like the same thought. So let's say a typical example, I see the mouse, there's a mouse in my kitchen, number 1. Number 2, I'm going to kill the mouse. Why? I hate mice. I have disgust. How disgusting. How dare that mouse be in my kitchen? So the motivation is aversion, is anger. Okay, that's the second of the 4. The third is I do the action. 4th, dead mouse. That's a complete action of killing. Now, let's say, same thing for you. You have the mouse. 2, I will kill the mouse. But look at your motivation. You have compassion for the mouse. The poor little mouse is suffering. Oh my God, we do this with our pussycats and our dogs. We're killing them all the time. And you do mean well. You do have compassion. The poor mouse, look at its suffering, and you have no view of reincarnation. So you think, I must kill the mouse and I must stop the mouse's suffering. That's a really common experience in the West. So 3, you do the action. 4, result, dead mouse. Now, what's the difference between the karma I create and the karma you create? The whole difference is the motivation. So you could say, I create heavy duty karma, I had anger and I completed by harming the mouse. You meant well, but the Buddha would say you made a mess because you have no clairvoyance, you have no wisdom, you have no certainty that when you kill that mouse, that its consciousness will definitely get a better human rebirth and meet the Dalai Lama and get a practice. You can't be certain of anything. So you're playing Russian roulette with the mouse's mind, but you feel good because you thought you were compassionate, and you were. So your compassion causes you to create some virtuous karma, but you didn't help the mouse at all. You sent it from the frying pan into the fire, let's say. It probably went to a lower realm rebirth. So you didn't help the mouse at all. That's really making a mess. But we do actions like this all the time. That's why His Holiness says compassion's not enough. You've got to have wisdom. So of course the wisdom there is literally clairvoyance. You've got to have the confidence to know that when you kill that mouse, you are certain a virtuous karmic seed would be triggered at that time and it'll get a nice human rebirth. So of course we haven't got that wisdom. So mind your own business. Love the mouse, take care of it, look after it, put it in a safe place, say prayers in its ear, and let it die peacefully as well as you can. We don't have the wisdom to know. That's a really classic example. So we do that all the time. So you mean well, but as Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. So from your side, you meant well to help that person. You gave them $5 and they went and used it to, buy a pill to kill themselves, let's say, because you didn't have the wisdom. But you didn't create much negative karma because you did mean well. So, but meaning well is not enough. That's why we've got to have the wisdom wing. It's a vital point, which means we just don't sit there and do nothing. We do our best, but according to our wisdom. And this is quite shocking to think like this in the West. We don't think this. I meant well, we say. We have to learn from our experiences, do the best we can based on what wisdom we have got, I hope that's clear. Next question. Yes, sweetheart. Yes, Diana. Hello, darling.
Again.
Yes, I can hear you now. Good.
Oh, lovely to see you again. Thank you.
Yes, darling.
And best wishes for your sister's
my
passage in the
darling,
bardo. I know you.
No, thank you, Diana. My sister, my older sister, 1 year older than me, 79, she fell down the stairs about a month ago. And I got to the hospital. Came to Australia and got to the hospital in time. Devastated. She fell on her head, destroyed her poor little brain. But luckily, when I got to the hospital, they were keeping her breathing so I could do mantras and things for her. And then I was so happy about that. So yes, thank you, Diana. Thank you, darling. So what's your question, sweetheart?
Yeah, I've been thinking of you. Oh, look, I had to put my hand up then because it relates a little to the question before, where you think you're doing good, but you cause a mess because of lack of wisdom. And I keep falling into this trap, which I think a lot of, especially people that identify with being female, might recognize. The goody girl,
That's right. Mummy's little helper. Yes, right.
Yeah, the goody girl.
Yeah.
I've got something that might. It's such a subtle thing. Well, let's put it this way. I find it hard to articulate, but it keeps my habits going round and round and round.
So just ask
and it's something to do with pleasing others.
That's right.
And in pleasing others, I don't please myself.
I'll tell you.
Things fall apart.
I will tell you the answer, Diana.
And it conflicts with bodhicitta, and I get mixed up.
Okay, darling, listen. We've got virtuous states of mind which are not neurotic, which don't cause suffering, which are reasonable, which connect with others. They're good. We try to grow those. And then we have the other ridiculous nonsense that are I-based, fear-based, distorted, neurotic. But this is the point. So this is the kind of one, the good girl one. You are a kind person. So don't dismiss your kindness. You do have kindness. You are a helper. You do want to help people. Don't dismiss that. But what makes a mess of it is this attachment. But honey child, the main attachment here, which is the subtlest one and the hardest to recognize, which we all have, which is this constant craving to be seen as a good girl. It's called attachment to reputation. It's the hardest one to go. That they all say the yogis in the mountains have given up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but they're still thinking of what the people in the village are thinking about them. This is the subtlest attachment, darling, more than for anything. And it's harder to see in a good person, in a kind person, because we've all got this attachment. Since we're born, honey, we've got this craving to be verified by others, to be validated by others. That's the irony of ego. So that's what makes the mess. And it's very hard to identify, sweetheart. Are we communicating? Diana, she's frozen.
Yeah, it's really hard.
It is, darling. So all you can just do.
Thank you so much.
Don't puzzle about it. That's why you've got to keep practicing. Control your body, control your speech, control the mouth. I mean, we don't go around killing and stealing too often, but we vomit out everything out of our damn mouth. If we can shut our mouth for one day, it's a miracle. Then 90% of our troubles won't occur. So we can really hear this as a practice. It just seems so silly in the West to control your mouth. So if you control your body and speech, that's the beginning, that grounds you. Then you've got more space to see the mind. And then as you keep practicing, you begin to drill down deeper, and you get to see your mind and all the tricky bits inside there before you rush off and do something to help the person and then make a mess. I mean, you do your best. It's okay. Don't get all twisted about it. But it's a gradual process, honey. Becoming aware of our mind is a gradual process. It takes time, but you've got to start with your body and speech first. If you vomit out every thought you feel, you'll never control your mind. Not possible. Are we communicating? Diana?
Yes. It's just, I'll just keep going round and round and round. So thank you.
No, you don't keep going round and round and round. It's not like that. You just start with controlling. You just do your practice, honey. Are you living your vows? Do your practice every day? Have long-term patience, and you gradually get better at it. It's not hit and miss, honey. All the instructions are there. It's not hit and miss, darling. I promise.
Okay.
Do you understand? Or not? So where's the problem? Say the problem. What's the problem?
Well, it's that thing of like, there's a poem by William Stafford, and he says, the saddest people are those that are not right in their lives, who are acting to make things right for others. They act only from the self, and that self will never be right. No luck,
wait a minute,
no
I'm
help,
lost
no
completely
wisdom.
now. Can you just talk in your own words, please, where your problem is? What's your problem? How does it manifest?
It's just like the habit of pleasing others.
But honey, what's wrong with pleasing others? Pleasing others is kindness, Diana. So where's the problem with pleasing others?
Well, the problem comes up. Well, no, but they are pleasing others, and then
what?
I please others, and then things don't work out. I can't explain. Sorry, I'll come
Give
back
a simple example, Diana. Give one example. One example.
All right. Trying to please others this week. I have some film students wanting to make a film and wanting me to act in it, and I said I would, wanting to please them. So then and then someone else asked me to do a job for money, so I said, okay, I need the money, I'll do that, and I'll tell the film students I can't act in it, but they can use my house, and then it comes back, I do start the job, and then they don't need me anymore. And now I've
so where's the fault? So where's the fault? Where's the fault, do you think? What mistake did you make? Huh?
Maybe because I said yes. Maybe because I said yes to money. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, if you're suffering, it's got to come to attachment. So you just got to work it out. You've got to identify it. Rushing in, saying yes to everything. This is what I'm talking about. So it's not going around and round. You have to learn to identify it in your own mind. And that just takes time, Diana. So if you do have a practice, you've just got to keep practicing one step at a time. Have you got a practice?
Yes, but I think my practice perhaps is too rigid. I do sadhanas every morning and every night. So I do.
That's all right. You're praying to the Buddhas. You're getting blessings. It's doing wonderful. Do you do purification? Do you do the 4 opponent powers?
I do Vajrasattva every night.
Well, hell, girl, you're doing all right. So try and be a little bit happy with your progress. You're sowing great seeds for the future, Diana. So meanwhile, you get into a bit of a mess, but it's okay. You're doing all right, girl. Come on, please. It's all right. Okay. You're doing great.
That's right.
Okay.
I do Guru Chalpa. I do Guru. Okay, thank you.
Megan in Bali.
Thank you.
All right, sweetheart. Megan, hi, darling. Happy to hear you, Megan. Happy to see you again. I can't see you, but I'm glad you're there. Talk to me.
Sorry, Robina. Hello. Thank you to everybody for this evening. It's just wonderful. Robina, a question to you. You had mentioned a little bit earlier. We do not suffer because of compassion. Now, no. I understand that in terms of the attachment, but when does sentimental attachment, well, not when does it? How do you move from sentimental attachment to compassion? And I'm not referring like I understand sentimental compassion is when you see the poor dog and it's very obvious.
That's what I meant
let's
by sentimental compassion. It's nothing wrong with having compassion for the dog, but what we have to recognize, which is very subtle, Megan, is that you'd have compassion for the dog, but you wouldn't have compassion for the guy who kicked the dog. So that's because of attachment. It's easy to have compassion for a little person crying, but we don't have any logic for why you'd have compassion for the person who kicked the dog. So that's a deeper level. And that's why you've got to go back to basics, look at the Four Noble Truths, understand karma, and work more on your own mind and your own suffering. And then that informs your ability to see the world and have compassion, not just for the dog, but for the harmers as well. And that's rooted in understanding karma, darling. Of course.
And so in terms of that, would compassion though not be in some ways a heavy feeling?
No,
if,
not at
if
all.
you're having
no, it's anger and attachment that are heavy feelings. Compassion is not a heavy feeling. I mean, it's heavy for us now, but we confuse it with, it's not, the heaviness doesn't come from compassion. That's a power when it's pure compassion, when you're a high being and you've given up attachment and anger. That compassion is tremendous and powerful and brave and wise in its incredible quality. And it's unbelievable. You see and feel the suffering, but it doesn't drag you down. It gives you strength to never give up trying to help. That's the point. So why we don't feel like that now is because we have attachment, which only wants to be comfortable, only wants to be happy, and can't stand problems. And then we get angry. That's the heaviness, darling. This analysis does not exist in the West. It's quite subtle. It's Buddha's analysis, and it's amazing if we can hear it.
Thank you.
Good,
you answered really.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. What else, Aileen? What else? Peter and Robert, talk to me.
So also Arpita and Robert asked me to read out their question.
Good. Go on then. Please, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back. If giving up attachment is the solution, oh no, sorry, that was another one. What about if you are aware of your attachment and know it, but seem helpless to control the ramifications?
Well, honey, child, be patient. You can see clearly how to play the piano. You know all the theories, but you haven't practiced enough. So you just got to be humble and keep practicing. You've got to be humble and patient. It doesn't happen overnight. You always learn the theory first. Then you slowly put meat on the bones and it becomes experience. So we've got to be humble and patient. Just keep practicing. Just keep practicing. And then also, you see, it's sort of like the actual job of being a Buddhist is when you work on your mind. That's the actual hands-on job. But that's why we have to have all the other practices, like our purification and our prostrations and our visualizations and our mantras and our water bowls. It's sort of like if you go to Roger Federer and you say, please show me how to play tennis. Well, you can see that you're 20 kilos overweight. You're completely ridiculous. You don't even know anything about nutrition. You don't even know what a tennis racket is. And he will then answer you, I want you to go and do all the push-ups and do nutrition and lose 20 kilos. And you'll see, Roger, you didn't answer my question. How do I play tennis? And he repeat his answer. Well, that's what all the nundros are about. They're the nundros. You've got to go off and jog and get fit. Then when you're ready and your body is primed, now he'll teach you how to play tennis. So the actual job of being a Buddhist is working on your mind, That's the job. As Lama Yeshe says, being your own therapist. But we're not primed ready. We're as thick as posts. So we've got to do lots of practices, lots of purification. That's what the nundros are. That's their purpose. That's not being a Buddhist. You can wear robes, you're not a Buddhist. You do a mantra, you're not a Buddhist. You take refuge, you're not even a Buddhist then. It's when you work on your mind. That's the job of being a Buddhist. But that's a difficult job. Oh my goodness. So one step at a time, please. What else? Anything else there, Aileen? Yes, Siv. Hello, Siv. You talk to me.
Hello, Venerable Robina. How are you?
Good, darling.
That's good. Venerable Robina, how do we care and connect for others without caring about what they think of us?
Honey, child, it's a very difficult practice. We've all got the attachment that runs us is this craving to be seen as a nice girl. So it's very hard to get past that. So you have to.
But then how do you do it without doing that? How do you help others without caring about what they think of you.
Well, it takes time. It takes time. It takes time. It takes time. But give a simple example. I mean, it sounds very theoretical. Give me a simple example where that might be difficult.
What I was referring to, how do you not how do you
What?
How do you like not believe all the false labeling of
Not what?
I?
Sorry, not what? Sorry, what?
How do you not believe all the false labeling of I, and then it's still, I don't know, because sometimes when you don't care about what they think, it's like, how do you have a relationship?
You've got to give me a simple example. Give me a simple example, please, darling, in your own life, a simple example where it might be difficult. A simple example, please.
Like just say for work, if I'm trying to not care about what other people think, then it's like I don't care about them.
But what's the job I'm not clear. Give me an example of where you're trying to help somebody and not worry about what they think. Give an example.
Oh, I can't think of it on top of my head.
Right. So I don't think your theory is very clear. I think your example is not very. Let's say it's a child. Let's say you're a mum. This is an example, and you can see you said to that child 4 times, "No more chocolate," and they haven't listened. So you're out of compassion. You say, "You go to your room. I told you no more chocolate." So in that sense, you're risking them to be mad at mummy, but you don't care because you know it's best for them. That's difficult. Most mummies just want to be pleasing, So, or if you're helping your mother, let's say your mum's neurotic and she's always complaining about you. I hear that mums are like that. Mums always complain, "You don't love me enough. You never come to visit me enough." So what we do is we're always so unhappy and guilty because we think I should keep doing more to help mum. And then we judge our own efforts by the fact that she's never satisfied and is always criticizing us. No, that's mistaken. The fact that your mum is never happy is her problem because of attachment, but you do your best and you should be happy with your best, even if she's not satisfied. Are we communicating a bit now?
Yep.
You have to have courage to do this because we all want to be seen as a good girl. So we judge everything by that. So we make a mess because of it. It's really a tough one to see this. We've got to catch it. So you've got to have a strong wish to see what is the right thing to do, and based on good virtue and ethics. And you try to do that. So like at work, for example, in a meeting, you might say something that other people don't like, but it's the right thing. That needs courage, Siv. That needs courage.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're communicating now, huh?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So we've got 7 minutes to go, Aileen. What's the story?
Okay, so maybe just one last question, do you think, Venerable Robina? There's many here. Yeah. So here's one. I have had hundreds of moths who ate my food and ate the holes into all my sweaters. So a nun told me to talk to them and ask if they would please leave my apartment or else I would have to kill them. It didn't work. They stayed. So I put traps up.
Okay, then what happened? They all died or what?
Traps up where they were stuck, I think, to the traps. Terrible to see, and I feel
okay. So listen, okay, thank you very much. I'll tell you a good example of a friend of mine. One nun took some Pemo, went off to meditate up in the bush, wherever. She was a meditator, and then she brought up her sacks of flour and all these things, and somehow whatever a moth is, I don't know, but it turned out first it began to be a little crawly thing, and then it turns into a moth, and she had hundreds of moths exactly like you. Well, I'll tell you what she did. She had a little cup. She went to each moth. She caught the moth. She blew a mantra on it, and she released it outside. She took weeks, and she didn't harm one damn moth. So that's incredible. You just sit there hoping the moths will all go away. That's too passive. You could have caught each one with compassion and kindness and released it, but you didn't. You sat there and let it eat your house. I mean, I'm just giving a blunt answer here. You can't win every time, And on the another answer, maybe you could have done the 4 opponent powers. And if you regret having harmed these moths, because that's why they're harming you, they're eating your house and your food, how greedy of them. But if you'd regretted whatever actions you did in the past to harm these moths, and then you vowed not to do it again, don't be surprised they'd all leave, but you didn't do that one either. So there's many methods.
Sorry, Venerable Robina, she then went on to say that she did some Vajrasattva practices and dedications, but she thinks it might not be purifying having put up the traps.
Oh, that's just a discussion. I'm not discussing that. I'm talking about purifying the karma that she created in 47 lives ago, where she must have invaded the moths' homes and eaten their food. That's the cause of why they were harming her. Regret is a very precise action. So, I mean, there's lots of things, but also, yeah, there's my two answers. I can't be perfect, can't give a perfect answer. But when we understand the four opponent powers, each of those 4 steps purify each of the 4 ways that karma ripens. So, for example, regret, having done whatever action you did 42 lives ago to harm these moths, that's causing them, there's the cause of why they're eating your food in your house. That if you'd regretted having done that and then vowed not to do it again, that's the purification process of that precise. So they might have then gone because you're shifting the karma. That's what I'm saying, very precise. So regret purifies the karma called experiences similar to the cause, which is what other beings do to you. The second one, reliance and refuge and compassion, purifies environmental karma. The third one, doing the antidote, doing your practice and Vajrasattva itself, purifies the lower realm karma. And the fourth one, vowing not to do it again, purifies the habit. So we've got to be very precise in these practices, not just vaguely have a vague idea of regretting and just doing Vajrasattva. Each of these is 4 very precise psychological steps. So, I mean, and then when you do these sincerely, these shift things, you know. But also you could have saved them, done what my friend did, Pemo, each moth one at a time, spent weeks releasing every one of them. How amazing, how kind, you know. I mean, maybe you had hundreds, well, she did too. So that takes time and patience, doesn't it? People, thank you so much.
I'm going to pin.
Whatever, thank you so much. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Venerable Nun, Tenzin Palmer. I hope you're doing well. Are you doing well? Happy and perky? Healthy? Still alive? Haven't fallen down the steps like my darling sister? I'm happy. Good. Okay. So you're going to over the weekend. This is wonderful. So when is Venerable Tenzin Palmer giving her class?
So I'll give the time just in Indian Standard Time, and
so when's she giving her class?
It will be 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time.
Tomorrow or Sunday?
Yep. Tomorrow.
Good. I'll see you then. I'm very happy. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to finish with a tiny prayer. Well, just two thoughts. One is we think as many moments as we've been together is as many seeds we've planted. So we're going to nourish these seeds, we think, with our practice, one step at a time, so that these seeds will ripen in the future, just as we motivated as our Buddhahood. And may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. Jangchub, Semchog, Rinpoche, Make, Panam, Keguchi, Kepa Nyampa, Mepa Yang, Gongne, Gondu, Pavashog. That's it, people. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Venerable Nuns. Thank you, Venerable Palmer. Thank you, Aileen. Thank you, everybody, for your nice questions. And Pranav, keep it simple, honey. Pranav, keep it simple, all right? You promise? Thank you, darling. Goodbye. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
See you all tomorrow.
Wonderful experience.
So much.
For your courage.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you, Eileen, for organising this too. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Pranav. Thank you,
Venerable
Eileen.
Thank you, good so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Thank you.